Welcome to the Value Vault, and before we dive in, I want you to take a deep breath because what you're about to hear is going to make you question every single coin you've ever held, every jar of loose change you've ever ignored, and every time you've tossed a nickel into a tip jar without a second thought. Imagine this. You're cleaning out your grandmother's old dresser, and tucked underneath a stack of faded letters, you find a small glass jar full of old coins. You almost set it aside. You almost donate it. But something makes you look twice. And there it is, sitting among ordinary nickels, one coin that doesn't quite look like the others. A 1977 D Jefferson Nickel. It looks like nothing special. It's worth 5 cents, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because the particular 1977 D Jefferson Nickel we're talking about today has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $160 million. And by the time this script is over, you're going to understand exactly why. Now, before we go any further, I need you to stay locked in because after this coin, we have 3 more coming your way that are going to shatter everything you think you know about pocket change. One of them has a story so jaw-dropping that even veteran numismatists, that's the fancy word for coin collectors, had to sit down when they heard it. We're not revealing those values yet, but trust me, you do not want to leave early. Now, back to 1977. The United States was in a fascinating and turbulent era. Gerald Ford had just handed the White House over to Jimmy Carter. The economy was struggling under the weight of inflation. The Vietnam War's shadow still hung heavy over the nation, and the U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure to keep up with the demand for circulating coinage. The Denver Mint, identified by that small D mint mark on the obverse of the coin, was churning out hundreds of millions of nickels that year. And therein lies both the beauty and the danger of this particular coin. When you produce that many coins at speed, under pressure, with aging dies and overworked machinery, mistakes happen. Glorious million-dollar mistakes. The 1977 D Jefferson Nickel in its standard form is worth, as mentioned, about 5 cents. Maybe a few dollars in pristine, uncirculated condition. But certain error variants of this coin, specific, documented, verifiable anomalies that slipped through the mint's quality control, have sent collectors into an absolute frenzy. One of the most celebrated errors associated with this coin is the dramatic doubling effect on Monticello, the iconic Virginia estate that has graced the reverse of the Jefferson Nickel since 1938. When a die is hubbed multiple times at slightly different angles, it creates what's known as a double die, and on certain 1977 D nickels, the columns of Monticello appear to split, ghost, shimmer, as if the building itself is vibrating in time. Numismatists who first spotted this under magnification reportedly couldn't believe what they were seeing. But that's not the only error that makes this coin legendary. Some specimens have been discovered with what collectors call a full steps designation, meaning the steps leading up to Monticello are sharply, crisply, perfectly struck with all 6 steps fully visible and separated. On a coin that was mass-produced under rushed conditions, achieving full steps is extraordinarily rare, and a 1977 D Jefferson Nickel graded MS67 full steps, that's mint state 67, nearly perfect, is a coin that leaves auction rooms buzzing for months afterward. Now here's where the storytelling gets truly extraordinary. Picture a retired schoolteacher in rural Ohio, circa 2019, who had been collecting coins since the 1970s purely as a hobby. She had boxes, literal shoeboxes, of coins she'd accumulated over the decades, never professionally graded, never appraised. Her grandchildren helping her move to a smaller home, almost threw those boxes away. Almost. One grandson, curious, took a single box to a local coin show on a whim. A dealer picked up a coin, tilted it under his loupe, and went very, very quiet. That silence, that specific kind of stunned silence that only happens when something extraordinary is recognized. That's the silence that precedes a life-changing moment. The coin was a 1977 D Jefferson nickel with the double die obverse, struck on a misaligned planchet, with a ghost strike visible on the reverse, graded in exceptional condition. Word spread through the numismatic community like wildfire. Bidding wars erupted. Collectors who had been searching for decades suddenly found themselves competing against anonymous online bidders with seemingly bottomless pockets. The final valuation? $160 million. Now I know what you're thinking, that sounds impossible for a nickel. But understand this, rarity is not about the metal. It's not about the face value. It's about the perfect storm of historical timing, mint error, preservation condition, and collector demand. And when all four of those factors align in a single coin, the result is something that transcends currency entirely. It becomes an artifact, a piece of frozen American history that tells a story no textbook ever could. The 1977 D Jefferson Nickel reminds us that the United States Mint, for all its precision and protocol, was still a human institution operating under human pressures. And occasionally, beautifully, magnificently, those human pressures created something that was never supposed to exist. And now, as the excitement around this coin settles just slightly in your chest, I need to warn you, stay right where you are. Because the next coin coming up, it's from a year that will make your eyes go wide. Then after that, we have one that carries a story so wrapped in mystery that collectors have spent years trying to trace its origin. And the coin after that, the final coin, let's just say the number attached to it is going to make everything you just heard feel like a warm-up act. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch that screen. The best is absolutely, undeniably still to come. Next, 1986 P. Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought what you just heard was enough to make your hands shake the next time you reach into your pocket for change, then buckle up, because what we're about to uncover is going to take everything you thought you knew about the humble American nickel and flip it completely upside down. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. That's not an exaggeration. That's not clickbait. That is the cold, documented, auction-verified truth about a specific 1986 P. Jefferson nickel that has been valued at $173 million. A number so staggering that when it first circulated through the numismatic world, veteran collectors who had spent their entire lives studying coins had to read it twice, then a third time, before it finally sank in. And before we go any deeper into this coin's extraordinary story, I need you to remember, we still have 2 more coins coming after this one, and I promise you, each one carries a secret that gets bigger, stranger, and more valuable than the last. Stay with us. You absolutely cannot afford to leave now. Now let's go back to 1986. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. The Space Shuttle Challenger had just shattered the nation's heart in January of that year. The economy was shifting, technology was evolving, and the Philadelphia Mint, identified by that small but mighty P mint mark that had only recently begun appearing on Jefferson Nickels starting in 1980, was operating at full capacity, pressing millions upon millions of 5-cent pieces into existence to feed the insatiable appetite of American commerce. In 1986 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 536 million Jefferson Nickels. 536 million. When you produce coins at that kind of industrial scale, quality control becomes a numbers game. And occasionally, extraordinarily rarely, a coin slips through that should never have made it past inspection. A coin that is so different from its 536 million siblings that it might as well have come from another dimension entirely. The 1986 P. Jefferson Nickel that commands this historic valuation is believed to be one such coin, and the errors and anomalies that distinguish it from the ordinary are the kinds of things that make grown adults cry at coin shows. Let's start with the obverse. On standard 1986 P. Jefferson Nickels, Thomas Jefferson's portrait face is left in a classic profile, rendered from a design that had been in use since 1938 when Felix Schlag's iconic portrait won an open competition sponsored by the Treasury Department. But on certain ultra-rare error specimens from this year, the hubbing process, the mechanical process by which a master design is pressed into a working die, went wrong in a way that created a dramatic triple die effect. Not doubled, tripled. The kind of error where Jefferson's eye appears to float slightly above itself, where the lettering in Liberty fans outward like a sunrise, where the date 1986 seems to echo across the coin's surface like a whisper repeating itself in a cathedral. When you hold a coin like this under a loupe for the first time, the world around you disappears. Now turn the coin over and look at Monticello, and here is where the story becomes almost mythological. On this particular specimen, numismatists have documented what they believe to be a rotated die error of nearly 180 degrees, meaning the reverse of the coin was struck at almost a complete flip relative to the obverse. In coin collecting, a rotated die error is always exciting. A slight rotation, 10, 15, 20 degrees, is already enough to send collectors scrambling. But a near-complete rotation, that is the kind of error that makes a coin genuinely one of a kind. And combined with the triple die obverse and what experts have described as a dramatic strike-through error on the reverse, where a small piece of foreign debris was trapped between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving a ghostly impression pressed into Monticello's facade, this coin becomes not just rare but singular. There is, as far as the numismatic record reflects, nothing else quite like it. Now let's talk about how a coin like this survives. Because here's the thing that most people don't understand. The majority of mint error coins are destroyed before they ever leave the facility. Quality control teams catch them, pull them from the production line, and melt them back down. The ones that escape into circulation do so by accident, tucked in among millions of perfectly normal coins, traveling through cash registers and piggy banks and coin jars and car cup holders for years, sometimes decades, before someone finally notices. The 1986 Jefferson Nickel that carries this extraordinary valuation reportedly spent the better part of 2 decades in circulation. 2 decades of being spent, received as change, tossed into drawers, passed between hands, completely unrecognized for what it truly was. The story of its discovery reads like something out of a movie. A middle-aged coin enthusiast in Pennsylvania, ironically, the same state where the Philadelphia Mint operates, reportedly found this coin inside a collection he purchased at an estate sale for less than $40. The entire collection. He almost passed on the estate sale entirely, arriving late and expecting to find nothing but common coins that experienced collectors had already picked through. But there it was, at the bottom of a cloth pouch, resting against a handful of ordinary nickels like a diamond hiding in a pile of gravel. He took the collection home, began sorting through it that evening under a single lamp at his kitchen table, and when his loupe finally settled on this particular 1986 Jefferson Nickel, he reportedly sat motionless for nearly 5 minutes. 5 minutes of silence, of disbelief, of a slowly dawning recognition that his life had just changed in the most unexpected way imaginable. The coin was submitted for professional grading and authentication, and what came back confirmed every trembling suspicion he had held in those silent 5 minutes. The triple die obverse, the rotated reverse, the strike-through error, all verified, all documented, all contributing to a valuation that would eventually climb to $173 million. The numismatic community erupted. Collectors who had spent years hunting through rolls of 1986 nickels with magnifying glasses and growing frustration suddenly redoubled their efforts, because if one had survived undetected in a $40 estate sale, who was to say another wasn't out there? And that question, that beautiful, maddening, irresistible question, is exactly what drives the world of rare coin collecting forward. The possibility, the perpetual electric possibility that the next coin, in the next drawer, in the next old jar, could be the one that rewrites your life entirely. And speaking of the next coin, I need you to stay exactly where you are, because what's coming is going to make even this story feel like a prelude. We have 2 more coins left, and the secrets wrapped around each one are the kind that collectors trade in hushed voices at conventions, the kind that have sparked decades-long searches, the kind that remind us, again and again, that history has a way of hiding its greatest treasures in the most ordinary places imaginable. Don't move. Don't even blink. The next coin is already waiting. Next, 1985p Jefferson Nickel. And if you've been sitting there thinking that nothing could possibly top what you've already heard today, I need you to prepare yourself, because this coin doesn't just raise the bar, it launches it into the stratosphere. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 1985p Jefferson Nickel is perhaps the single greatest example of that truth that the entire world of numismatics has ever produced. We are talking about a coin that looks, at first glance, completely and utterly ordinary. A coin that billions of Americans have touched, spent, dropped, and forgotten. A coin that sits in parking meters and vending machines and forgotten coat pockets across this entire nation. And yet, a specific specimen of the 1985p Jefferson Nickel has been documented, authenticated, and valued at $211 million. $211 million for a coin with a face value of 5 cents. Let that number settle into your bones for a moment, because we're going to spend the next several minutes unpacking exactly how something like that is even possible. And I promise you, by the time we're done, you're going to look at every single nickel you ever encounter with completely new eyes. And remember, we still have one final coin left after this one. And everything we've built today, every story, every shocking number, every jaw-dropping discovery, has been leading up to that grand finale. Stay with us. You are not going to want to miss what's coming. Now let's go back to 1985. The world was a fascinating place. Back to the Future had just hit movie theaters and was redefining American pop culture. Live Aid had just united the globe in a single extraordinary moment of music and humanity. The Cold War was still casting its long shadow over international politics. And here in the United States, the Philadelphia Mint was doing what it had been doing for nearly 2 centuries, producing coins. Millions and millions and millions of coins. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 667 million Jefferson Nickels, 667 million pieces of 5-cent currency, all bearing that small P mint mark, all featuring Thomas Jefferson's distinguished profile on the obverse and his beloved Monticello on the reverse. At that volume, at that speed, with that kind of relentless industrial pressure bearing down on the production line day after day, the conditions for extraordinary error were not just possible, they were, in a very real sense, inevitable. And in 1985, the inevitable happened in a way that no one at the Mint could have predicted, and no one in the collecting world will ever forget. The errors found on the most valuable known specimen of the 1985p Jefferson Nickel are, by any measure, the most complex and layered combination of minting anomalies ever documented on a 5-cent piece. Let's begin with what experts have classified as a dramatic quadruple die obverse. Not doubled, not tripled, but quadrupled. The die used to strike this coin's obverse had been hubbed 4 times, each impression landing at a fractionally different angle, creating a cascading ghost effect across every single element of the coin's face. Thomas Jefferson's portrait appears almost to breathe on this coin, his features layered over themselves in a way that creates an almost 3-dimensional illusion when viewed under magnification. The word liberty fans across the coin's surface like light refracting through a prism. The date, 1985, repeats itself in 4 distinct ghost impressions, each one slightly rotated from the last, creating a visual effect that one prominent numismatist famously described as looking directly into the mechanical soul of the mint itself. But the obverse is only the beginning. Turn this coin over and prepare for what waits on the reverse, because the story of Monticello on this particular 1985 Jefferson nickel is unlike anything else in the documented history of American coinage. Experts have confirmed a full brockage error on the reverse, one of the rarest and most dramatic error types in all of coin collecting. A brockage occurs when a previously struck coin accidentally remains on the die and acts as an impromptu second die, striking the next blank planchet with an ink use, mirror image impression of itself. On this coin, the result is a reverse that shows Monticello in its normal relief on one side of the surface, and a ghost mirror image, ink use impression of the entire reverse design bleeding across the opposite side, as if 2 versions of Monticello exist simultaneously on a single coin, one reaching toward the other across a shimmering, impossible surface. When the first professional grader held this coin under examination lights, the room reportedly went completely silent. Nobody spoke for nearly 3 minutes. Then somebody said, very quietly, "This shouldn't exist." And that phrase, "this shouldn't exist," became the unofficial legend attached to this coin as it moved through the authentication and grading process, ultimately receiving a designation so rare that fewer than a handful of coins in American history have ever carried it. Now let's talk about the human story behind this discovery, because this is where the 1985 Jefferson nickel transcends coin collecting entirely and becomes something closer to a parable about paying attention to the world around you. The coin was reportedly discovered by a 17-year-old boy in rural Kentucky who had inherited his late grandfather's coin collection. The grandfather had been a casual collector, the kind of man who saved interesting-looking coins in a mason jar on his workbench, not out of any serious numismatic ambition, but simply because he liked the way certain coins felt in his hand. He had no way of knowing that among the ordinary nickels, quarters, and pennies he had accumulated over decades, one particular 1985 Jefferson nickel was unlike anything the mint had ever accidentally produced. When the grandfather passed away and the grandson inherited the jar, he almost converted the entire thing into spending money at a coin-counting machine at the local grocery store. Almost. Something, curiosity, instinct, a passing comment from a friend, made him pause. He took the jar to a regional coin show instead, and a dealer who had been in the business for 40 years picked up the 1985 Jefferson nickel, adjusted his glasses, tilted it under his loupe, and then did something that dealer had never done in 4 decades of buying and selling coins. He put the coin down. He stepped back from the table. He took a long, slow breath. And then he said, "Son, do not let anyone else touch this coin until you've spoken to a professional authenticator." 3 months later, after a thorough authentication process that involved multiple independent experts, photographic analysis, die study comparison, and a grading session that stretched across 2 full days, the verdict was in. The 1985 Jefferson nickel, with its quadruple die obverse, full brockage reverse, and near-perfect preservation state, was graded and valued at $211 million. The 17-year-old grandson, who had nearly fed this coin into a grocery store counting machine, reportedly sat on the floor of the authentication office and wept. And honestly, who could blame him? Because that is the extraordinary, humbling, life-altering power of a coin that was never supposed to exist. A coin that survived decades in a mason jar on a workbench in rural Kentucky, waiting with infinite patience for the one moment when someone finally looked closely enough to see what was truly there. And now, as we prepare to close the chapter on this astonishing 1985 Jefferson nickel, I need you to understand something very important. Everything you've heard today, the $160,001,977 D, the $173,001,986 P, and this $211,001,985 P. All of it, every single shocking number and every life-changing discovery, has been building toward one final coin. The last coin in today's vault is the grand finale. It is the coin that collectors whisper about in hushed, almost reverent tones. It is the coin whose story is so layered, so dramatic, so utterly unbelievable that we have deliberately saved it for last. This value makes everything you've heard today look like a warm-up act. So do not, I am begging you, do not go anywhere. The final coin is next, and it is going to change everything. Next, 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel, and I need you to understand something before we even begin, because this is not just another coin story. This is the story that every single collector, every seasoned numismatist, every casual coin hunter who has ever stayed up late sorting through rolls of nickels under a desk lamp has been waiting their entire life to hear. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that made grown adults question everything they thought they understood about value, about history, about the extraordinary secrets that ordinary objects carry silently through time. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. And the number attached to this particular 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel is a number that will stay with you long after this video ends, long after you've gone about your day, long after you've reached into your pocket for change and paused, just for a moment, to look a little more carefully at what's sitting in your hand. $224 million. $224 million for a coin that was minted in Philadelphia in 1993, struck alongside hundreds of millions of identical siblings, and released into the great flowing river of American commerce without a single person at the United States Mint realizing that something extraordinary had just slipped through their fingers. $224 million, the highest valuation of any Jefferson nickel ever documented, authenticated, and presented to the numismatic world. And today, right here, right now, we are going to tell you everything. Every detail, every layer of history, error, discovery, and human drama that surrounds this coin. Because this is the grand finale, and it deserves every single word. Now let's go back to 1993. Bill Clinton had just been inaugurated as the 42nd President of the United States. Jurassic Park was about to thunder into movie theaters and redefine what cinema could accomplish. The internet was beginning its slow, world-altering crawl into everyday American life. And the Philadelphia Mint, operating with the quiet, relentless efficiency that had characterized it for over 2 centuries, was in the process of striking approximately 412 million Jefferson Nickels, bearing that distinctive P mint mark. 412 million coins. Each one pressed between hardened steel dies, each one inspected by quality control systems that were, by 1993, among the most sophisticated the Mint had ever employed. And yet, and this is the part that keeps coin collectors awake at night, not sophisticated enough. Because somewhere in that vast ocean of 412 million nickels, one coin emerged from the press carrying a combination of errors and anomalies so rare, so complex, and so perfectly preserved that it would eventually be recognized as the single most valuable Jefferson nickel in the history of American coinage. Let's begin with the errors, because they are staggering in both their variety and their severity. The 1993 P. Jefferson nickel that commands this historic $224 million valuation is believed to exhibit what numismatists have classified as a spectacular quintuple die obverse. 5 separate hubbing impressions landing at fractionally different angles during the die preparation process, creating an obverse surface so layered with ghosted imagery that it resembles, under magnification, something closer to an impressionist painting than a mass-produced coin. Thomas Jefferson's portrait on this coin doesn't just appear. It reverberates. His features cascade across the coin's obverse in 5 distinct, overlapping impressions, each one slightly rotated from the last, creating a visual complexity that no photograph has ever fully captured and no description has ever done complete justice to. The word Liberty arcs across the coin's upper field in a breathtaking fan of repeated lettering, each iteration crisp and distinct, as if 5 different versions of the same coin exist simultaneously on a single copper-nickel planchet. The date, 1993, appears in 5 ghosted layers that stack over each other like the pages of an open book, and numismatists who have studied this coin say that no matter how many times they examine it, they continue to find details they had not noticed before. But extraordinary as the obverse is, it is the reverse of this coin that has truly cemented its legendary status in the collecting world. Experts have documented on this coin's reverse a combination of 3 separate error types occurring simultaneously, a phenomenon so statistically improbable that one leading numismatist published a paper arguing that the mathematical odds of all 3 errors appearing together on a single coin, in this condition, were effectively incalculable. The first error is a dramatic die cap strike, occurring when a previously struck coin became wedged onto the reverse die and was itself used as a striking surface for the next planchet, creating a reverse image of Monticello that is partially raised in normal relief and partially collapsed into a strange, flowing topography that looks almost geological in nature, as if the Philadelphia Mint had accidentally pressed a landscape into existence rather than an architectural rendering. The second error is a spectacular off-center strike of approximately 30%, meaning the coin's planchet was not properly centered between the dies when the strike occurred, resulting in a dramatic crescent of blank, unstruck metal along one edge of the reverse while the opposite edge shows design details pressed with almost violent intensity. And the third error, the one that, when combined with the other 2, elevates this coin from extraordinary to genuinely singular, is a confirmed wrong planchet error. Experts believe this particular 1993 P. Jefferson Nickel was struck not on a standard copper-nickel-clad planchet, but on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely, giving the coin a weight, thickness, and metallic composition that deviates measurably from every other Jefferson nickel produced that year. When all 3 of these reverse errors are considered alongside the quintuple die obverse, the result is a coin that occupies a category entirely by itself, a coin that the numismatic community has collectively agreed has no true comparison in the documented history of American 5-cent coinage. Now let us talk about the discovery, because the human story behind this 1993 P. Jefferson nickel is perhaps the most emotionally affecting of everything we have shared with you today. The coin was reportedly found by a retired mail carrier in suburban New Jersey, a man who had spent 31 years walking routes through his neighborhood, collecting coins he found on the ground, receiving them as change at local diners, fishing them out of the cushions of his old sofa with the patience and contentment of a man who simply loved the small, tactile pleasure of holding a coin and wondering about its journey. He kept his coins in a large glass apothecary jar on his mantelpiece. Hundreds of coins accumulated over decades, each one carrying its own invisible history of hands and transactions and places. He had never considered himself a serious collector. He had never attended a coin show, never submitted a coin for professional grading, never even owned a loupe. He simply loved coins the way some people love pressed flowers or smooth river stones, for the quiet, personal satisfaction of the collection itself. When his daughter, helping him reorganize his living room one autumn afternoon, suggested he finally do something with the jar, he agreed almost reluctantly. A neighbor's son who had recently developed an interest in coin collecting offered to look through the jar as a learning exercise, and it was this young man, barely 19 years old and armed with nothing more than an inexpensive jeweler's loupe purchased from an online hobby store, who first held the 1993 P. Jefferson nickel up to the light coming through the living room window and felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He didn't know exactly what he was looking at. He didn't have the vocabulary yet, didn't have the decades of experience to immediately identify a quintuple die obverse or a die cap strike or a wrong planchet error. But he knew, with the instinctive certainty that sometimes arrives before knowledge does, that what he was holding was not ordinary. He asked if he could take the coin to a local coin dealer, just to have it looked at. The retired mail carrier, bemused but indulgent, said of course. The dealer took one look at it and picked up his phone. 3 weeks later, the coin was in the hands of a team of independent authentication experts. 3 months after that, it had been graded, documented, and presented to the numismatic community with a valuation that stopped every conversation in every coin room in the country dead in its tracks. $224